To discuss President Xi's state visit to Russia, we're now joined by Stephanie Carvin. She is an associate professor of international relations at Carleton University, also a former national security analyst. Stephanie, always good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
You know, in different times, this visit might not be getting the attention that it's getting right now. But given Russia's invasion of Ukraine, talk to us about the significance here. How significant is this visual cue from Xi that he's willing to be hosted by Putin in Moscow?
So I think there's a number of things that give this kind of a unique context. The first is that, of course, Vladimir Putin was declared to be or indicted as a war criminal by the International Criminal Court, and President Xi is the first leader to visit Putin, and wasn't shy about it. Right, arrived on a big plane, made a big show of it. So even though this trip was planned before that indictment, we're definitely seeing the fact that this is not something that bothers Mr. Xi. I think it's also sending a message to the West in the sense that there is alternate ways for the globe to order itself, and definitely President Xi has kind of been on something of a diplomatic mission recently with regards to the Middle East, where he's seems to have been able to get Saudi Arabia and Iran to reestablish diplomatic relations, and he's been put forward a peace plan, right? So I think there's a lot of kind of image bolstering here. China has been under pressure and maybe feeling a bit surrounded in the Indo-Pacific area, and this is a way for him to assert China on the global stage, regardless of what the West or the International Criminal Court thinks.
Well, talk to us about China's potential engagement with Russia here. How might that affect the war in Ukraine? Are we talking about arms, financing, trade? How might China actually be of aid to Russia right now?
In all kinds of ways. And in fact, China right now is a lifeline to Russia, right? In terms of finance, I believe trade was up between the two countries by 30% as Western sanctions took hold of Russia and they couldn't import many of the things they'd been importing before. China's financial system continues to connect Russia to world markets in some ways. And we also know that there's been some, despite all these sanctions, that Russia has found ways to import Chinese semiconductors, components that are very important for building things like missiles in kind of covert ways. So China has already been a lifeline for Russia in many ways, and there's no doubt in my mind that what Putin would like is that for some of this non-lethal aid to perhaps turn into lethal aid. The one thing that Russia is really, really missing right now is artillery and missiles, and that it's looking everywhere it can to try and bring this forward. So I imagine that was something that was discussed in the apparently 4.5-hour-long meeting that President Xi and Putin had.
Okay, but don't China and Russia already have competing interests in Central Asia?
They do, but I think to a certain extent, I don't know if it's an agree to disagree kind of situation, but the priority for Russia right now, without a doubt, is Ukraine. And yes, China is moving into some of these, Caucasus regions in areas like Kazakhstan and places like that. So there is competing interest. I mean, it was, I think 60, 70 years ago, they've actually fought a war against each other. And so, but at the same time, I think President Xi sees China as overall benefiting from the situation in Ukraine, right? He now basically has Russia as a client state. It's giving China an ability to put its own peace plan forward, so it looks good. It kind of is representing opposition to the West while trying to basically say that, hey, look, we're against what they call the Ukraine crisis. They don't call it the war as well, but we want to try and find some kind of solution to it. So I think that even though there is competition, in February of 2022, right before this invasion happened, both countries pledged to each other friendship without limits. And President Xi seems to be living up to that. And in fact, with this trip, is doubling down on it, despite all of the criticism of Russia over the last year.
Okay, I've got less than a minute here, but I do want to ask you, because China's relationship with the West certainly at a low right now. How far can President Xi actually go without permanently damaging, or at least for a long time, that relationship with the West?
That's a really interesting question. I think it wasn't so long ago that we were talking about Balloon Gate, right? This balloon that had flown over the United States, and that disrupted some of the plans I think President Xi had to perhaps try and find ways of working with the Biden administration, because they effectively cut their, decided not to have meetings with China. I don't know. I think China may have realized that as far as the West goes, that, the ship has largely sailed and it's going to have to find its own path in the world. And that's going to be working with countries in Africa, in parts of Asia, Russia, and what, traditionally was the non-aligned world. So this is a part of that, I think, of Xi trying to make a big splash on the global stage in recent months after his unprecedented third term in power.
Stephanie, always really great to have your insight. Thank you for this.
Thank you.